Welcome back to Fairy Garden Discoveries. While other fairies rushed through the garden, Pip liked to walk slowly. He noticed pebbles shaped like tiny moons, leaves that repeated their lines, and patterns that quietly told him what came next. Today, Pip and his friend Muddle discover that patterns aren't about being perfect. They're about noticing, repeating, and trying again. Pip loved walking slowly. While other fairies darted through the garden on busy wings, Pip preferred to wander with care, letting the world reveal itself one detail at a time. He noticed pebbles shaped like tiny moons, leaves with matching veins, and shells curled in careful spirals. To Pip, the garden was full of quiet conversations, if you only paused long enough to listen. This morning felt especially full of order. Sunlight filtered through the branches in repeating patches. Bright, soft, bright, soft. Bees buzzed past in gentle loops, tracing the same path again and again. Even Pip's footsteps followed a steady rhythm along the path. Something about it made Pip smile. Behind him, a small snail peeked out from beneath a leaf. His name was Muddle, and he followed Pip wherever he could, leaving a wiggly trail that never quite matched the neatness around him. Muddle didn't notice patterns the way Pip did, but he was very enthusiastic about being involved. Pip stopped and looked around. "Something's happening today," he said softly. "I think the garden is showing me a secret." Muddle inched closer, ready to help, whether the garden needed it or not. At the edge of the path, Pip noticed a line of pebbles pressed gently into the soil. He crouched low, studying them carefully. Gray pebble, white pebble, gray pebble, white pebble. The order repeated itself, calm and steady, like a song you could hum without thinking. Pip traced the line with his finger, then reached into his pocket and added another pebble at the end. Gray. The line still felt right. "That's a pattern," Pip said, nodding to himself. "It repeats in the same order." Muddle crawled closer, eyes wide. He admired the pebbles, then proudly placed a shiny purple stone right in the middle of the line. It sparkled beautifully, but the rhythm broke. Pip blinked, then chuckled. "That's a lovely stone, Muddle, but it doesn't follow the rule." Muddle tilted his head. "Rule?" Pip gently moved the purple pebble aside and restored the order. The pattern settled back into place, peaceful once again. "Patterns," Pip explained, "need the same pieces in the same order, again and again." Muddle nodded slowly, pretending to understand, while already planning his next contribution. Pip gathered a few more pebbles and laid them out on a flat rock nearby. Gray, white, gray, white, gray, white, gray, white. He paused, then smiled. "I already know what comes next." White. The pattern didn't surprise him anymore, it guided him. Pip liked that. Patterns made the world feel understandable, like you could predict what would happen if you paid close enough attention. Muddle watched closely this time. When Pip looked away, Muddle carefully placed a pebble at the end, white, just like the others. Pip's eyes lit up. "You followed the pattern." Muddle beamed with pride, then immediately added 2 more pebbles for good measure. The rhythm wobbled. Pip laughed. "Almost perfect. But patterns don't need extra surprises." He removed the extras, restoring the order once more. The line felt calm again, as if the stones themselves had relaxed. "Patterns," Pip said gently, "aren't about adding more. They're about repeating what belongs." Muddle nodded again, this time a little more thoughtfully. Farther along the garden path, Pip found a cluster of fallen leaves. Some were long and narrow, others round and wide. He laid them out carefully on the ground. Long leaf, round leaf, long leaf, round leaf. Muddle leaned in, impressed. The pattern felt familiar, even though the objects were different. It's the same idea, Pip explained. Different things can follow the same pattern. He repeated the sequence once more, then paused. Now watch. Muddle eagerly placed 3 leaves in a messy pile. Pip smiled kindly. That's a collection. Patterns need order. He gently rearranged the leaves, restoring the rhythm. Long, round, long, round. Muddle stared, then slowly slid 1 leaf into place exactly where it belonged. Pip clapped softly. You did it! The leaves rustled in the breeze as if pleased. Pebbles or leaves, it didn't matter. The rule stayed the same. And Pip was beginning to see that patterns weren't just something you found. They were something you could build, fix, and share, even with a snail who liked to help a little too much. Near the sandy edge of the garden, Pip spotted something new glinting in the morning light. Tiny shells lay scattered across the ground, some smooth and pale, others curled into neat spirals. Pip gathered a few and arranged them carefully. Spiral shell, smooth shell, spiral shell, smooth shell. The pattern felt steady and familiar, even though the objects were new. Pip smiled. See, Muddle. The pattern stayed the same, even though the pieces changed. Muddle leaned in close, his eyes shining. He studied the shells carefully, then proudly placed 3 spiral shells in a row. Pip paused. You repeated something, he said gently, but not the rule. Muddle blinked, then looked back at the line. Slowly, he slid a smooth shell into place. The rhythm returned at once. That's it, Pip said. Patterns follow a rule. When the rule changes, the pattern does too. The shells shimmered softly in the sunlight, pleased to be part of something orderly. Muddle smiled, feeling very clever, until he tried adding 1 more shell, just in case. Near the sandy edge of the garden, Pip spotted something new glinting in the morning light. Tiny shells lay scattered across the ground, some smooth and pale, others curled into neat spirals. Pip gathered a few and arranged them carefully. Spiral shell, smooth shell, spiral shell, smooth shell. The pattern felt steady and familiar, even though the objects were new. Pip smiled. See, Muddle. The pattern stayed the same, even though the pieces changed. Muddle leaned in close, his eyes shining. He studied the shells carefully, then proudly placed 3 spiral shells in a row. Pip paused. You repeated something, he said gently, but not the rule. Muddle blinked, then looked back at the line. Slowly, he slid a smooth shell into place. The rhythm returned at once. That's it, Pip said. Patterns follow a rule. When the rule changes, the pattern does too. The shells shimmered softly in the sunlight, pleased to be part of something orderly. Muddle smiled, feeling very clever, until he tried adding 1 more shell, just in case. Pip tried a new pattern. Pebble, pebble, leaf. Pebble, pebble, leaf. He left a space and waited. Muddle hurried forward and placed a pebble instead of a leaf. The pattern felt off, like a song missing its ending note. Pip didn't rush. Something's missing, he said. Muddle studied the line, then gasped. I skipped it. He swapped the pebble for a leaf, and the pattern settled back into place. When the order changes, Pip explained, the pattern breaks, but broken patterns can be fixed. Muddle smiled, relieved. Pip leaned back and looked around the garden. Waves rolled in and out, in, out, in, out. Birds hopped twice, then paused. Hop, hop, rest, hop, hop, rest. Patterns aren't just on the ground, Pip said. They're everywhere. Muddle tried hopping too. Hop, hop, roll. Pip laughed. Close enough. The garden felt full of quiet rhythm now. And for the first time, Muddle wasn't just copying, he was noticing. Patterns were beginning to make sense. Pip decided it was time to make something lasting. Along the garden path, he carefully arranged a long trail of objects, pressing each one gently into the soil. Stone, leaf, shell. Then again. Stone, leaf, shell. The pattern stretched farther than any he'd made before, neat and inviting, like an unfinished sentence waiting to be completed. At the end, Pip left one empty space. Muddle crept forward, excitement bubbling. He stared at the trail, whispering the order under his breath. Stone, leaf, shell. He hesitated, then reached for a leaf. Halfway there, he stopped. No, he said slowly. Shell comes last. He placed a stone instead. Pip's wings fluttered. You predicted it. Muddle's smile stretched wider than his shell. For the first time, he hadn't just followed a pattern, he had understood it. Pip nodded proudly. That's what patterns help us do. They let us know what comes next. The trail felt complete, and the garden seemed to hum its approval. Later that afternoon, another fairy wandered down the path. She paused at Pip's pattern trail, tilting her head thoughtfully. Without a word, she studied the objects, tracing the order with her finger. Stone, leaf, shell. She smiled, then added the correct piece at the end. Muddle gasped. She saw it too, Pip beamed. Patterns aren't just for one person. When the rule is clear, anyone can follow it. The fairy waved and continued on her way, leaving the trail just as neatly ordered as before. Muddle stared at the line with new respect. So patterns work even when you're not here? He asked. Pip nodded. That's the magic of them. Muddle sat quietly for a moment watching the trail. The garden felt calmer somehow, as if the order made everything easier to understand. Patterns weren't just about objects anymore, they were about sharing understanding, without even saying a word. As the day grew warmer, Pip and Muddle rested in the shade. Pip arranged a new line nearby. Shell, shell, leaf. Shell, shell, leaf. What comes next? Pip asked. Muddle studied it carefully. 2 shells, then a leaf. 2 shells, then a leaf. He placed 2 shells, then paused, and added a leaf. Pip clapped softly. Exactly. When patterns repeat, Pip explained, we can predict what comes next. That helps us plan, build, and to understand the world. Muddle nodded. It's like knowing the next step before you take it. The garden buzzed gently around them, full of repeating sounds and movements. Everything seemed to follow a quiet order. Muddle felt proud, not because he was perfect, but because he could notice, think, and try again. By evening, patterns lay scattered gently across the garden, never crowded, never rushed. The pebble paths, leaf lines, and shell trails all rested in their places, each following its own rule. Muddle followed Pip's newest pattern without a single mistake. Well, Pip said with a smile, almost without a mistake. Muddle laughed. I fixed it. Pip nodded. That's part of learning too. The garden felt peaceful now. Patterns didn't make things stiff or strict. They made them calm. They helped everything belong. As the sun dipped lower, Pip gathered his things, leaving the patterns behind for others to find. Tomorrow, there would be new ones. As the sun dipped lower, painting the garden in warm gold and soft shadows, Pip settled onto a smooth stone and looked back over the day. Patterns lay scattered gently across the ground, pebbles, leaves, shells, each one following a quiet rule, each one telling a small story. Patterns help us understand the world, Pip said softly. They show us what repeats, what belongs, and what comes next. Muddle sat beside him, tracing a line in the dirt with his antenna. I used to think patterns were about getting it right the first time, he admitted. But really, they're about noticing. Pip smiled. And trying again when something doesn't fit. The garden hummed around them, bees buzzing in loops, breezes moving through the leaves in steady waves. Nothing rushed. Nothing fell out of place. Patterns weren't about perfection. They were about paying attention, learning the rule, and letting that rule guide you forward. Even mistakes, Pip knew, helped make the pattern clearer. Muddle nodded thoughtfully. He liked that idea very much. As evening settled in and the first stars peeked through the sky, Pip and Muddle began their walk home. They followed the pebble path, gray, white, smiling as their steps matched its gentle rhythm. Patterns were everywhere now, in numbers, in nature, in the way the moon rose each night and the sun returned each morning. Some patterns were simple, others were tricky, but all of them helped the world make sense. Muddle paused once, eyeing the path, then carefully placed a pebble exactly where it belonged. This time, he didn't add anything extra. Pip laughed quietly. You've got it. Patterns weren't about squeezing things together or forcing them to fit. They were about order, balance, and knowing when something belonged, or when it didn't. Behind them, the garden rested peacefully, its patterns waiting to be found again tomorrow. And somewhere beneath the stars, new patterns were already beginning.